This is the Lector podcast for the third Sunday of Lent. This year, celebrated February 28th, 2016. The first reading is from the book of Exodus. The second reading is from the letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians. And then we have the Gospel according to Luke, where he speaks about the fig tree. If you noticed a little bit something different in my voice, I was saying what I was saying as if I were reading it. And a lot of times when I hear lectors, it's really obvious that they are reading from the book, because that is indeed what you're doing. What I want us to strive for, rather, is that it follows more natural speech patterns, more like the one I'm using now, the way that we talk to each other. And it takes some practice, because these are not our words. They have to become our words. And if I could sum up what I would really like all of us to work towards, it would be that, to have more of a natural speech pattern. Before I get to that, though, one of the ways that we do get a natural speech pattern is that we understand the words. And we understand how they're put together, and that's what this book is all about. So I'm on page 74. The first reading from the book of Exodus. Before we look at that, if you look on page 75, there's this small square. It says, to keep in mind, names of characters, often the first word of a reading, as it is in this case. So Moses is the main character of this reading. It's very important that we say Moses was tending the sheep, tending the flock of his father-in-law, rather than Moses was tending the flock, just kind of rushing by that. We need to really make that stand out. Okay, I'm going to read verbatim the commentary at the bottom. Before I do that, I need to make a note. So in Lent, during the 3rd, 4th, and 5th Sundays, we have the RCIA, the scrutinies, and they're at different masses. This week, the first scrutiny will be at the Saturday evening Mass at 4 p.m. And those readings are from Cycle A. The preparation for that begins on page 78, and I will not include that in this. I'm only going to be working to give you this recording for Cycle C, which is for all the other Masses. Okay. Again, I want to read the commentary at the bottom of 74. A typical afternoon of tending sheep turns into a formative event for Moses, the Israelites, and all of human history. In Moses' unexpected encounter with God, we learn about who God is and how God interacts with people. Who God is comes later, but from the start, we glimpse the ways of God. God takes people by surprise and calls those who least expect to become his instruments. God is both totally other and remarkably intimate with humanity. For while he warns Moses to come no closer and remove his sandals, he also has taken notice of the affliction of my people. God's promises are always fulfilled, but seldom according to human expectations. For only a few generations lived in the land promised to Abraham before a famine drove them to Egypt. There they spent nearly 500 years, mostly as slaves, until God sent Moses to lead them back to their own land. Remarkably, this people will rely on a 600-year-old promise to uproot themselves and follow Moses back to the promised land. Although raised like a prince in Egypt's royal household, Moses is now an outcast because he has killed an Egyptian. The remarkable bush that's blazing yet not consumed grabs his attention, but it is the divine voice issuing from the bush that convinces him he's in the presence of awe-inspiring mystery. Immediately he hides his face, for no one risked death. For one risked death, it is believed, if he dared to look at God. By identifying himself as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, God names his enduring relationship with these children of the patriarchs. Today's text omits verses that revealed God's insecurity. He asks God's name because being able to cite it will give him credibility before his kinsmen in Egypt. In biblical times, something was considered real only if you could name it. Knowing someone's name created a bond and a degree of control over that person. But here God is saying, my name is, you can't control me. God will be in relationship with Moses, but his unique name asserts God's absolute self-sufficiency and autonomy. He is the cause beyond all causes. Beholding to no one, God acts with complete freedom and out of love and mercy for the Israelites. Communicate these certainties when you declare God's closing message to his chosen people. And now I'm going to look at the liner notes to the left of that first reading. Though the opening events are remarkable, let your tone suggest something special is about to happen. So in other words, if you just say Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law, just stating the facts, that does not give a tone that something special is about to happen. You might like have in mind that he's just about to see this bush on fire, that it is on fire but will never consume. It just keeps on burning. So you're anticipating maybe something like this. Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro, the priest of Midian. Leading the flock across the desert, he came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There, an angel of the Lord appeared to Moses in fire and flaming, etc. So that would set that tone. So later on it says, communicate the bizarre nature of this. The bizarre nature was there was this bush on fire and it just kept burning, even though normally it would have burned out. And later on it says he wants to solve this mystery. So he sees this on fire and he goes, I must go over to look at this remarkable sight and see why the bush is not burned. He's curious. The second Moses receives more emphasis. So Moses, the second one, make it a little bit, hey, and then when God answers him, God is making Moses aware of who has reached out to him. Come no nearer. Now, I don't want you to, whenever you speak the sound of God, to be like the Wizard of Oz, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain, nothing like Cecil B. DeMille, but it should have a little bit more profound voice of some kind in how you say it. Remember, God is reasserting his intimate relationship with the patriarchs. Speak of them tenderly, okay? So when you say, hey, Isaac, hey, Jacob, they're very tenderly. No human could survive looking upon God. Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. And then the final, just on the bottom of that line, these lines reveal the merciful compassion of God. I have witnessed the affliction of my people in Egypt. Next page. I have come down is a biblical figure of speech that signals an extraordinary divine intervention. So it's not that he just came down, but this is a big deal. Therefore, I have come down to rescue them. Just really dwell on those words. Special knowledge will give Moses confidence to approach his kingdom. When God says, I am who am. This is not a typical speech pattern that we use in English. I am who am. I don't know what you could say. I am who is, I guess. But that is, it's an unusual grouping of words, and it needs to be done very deliberately and with some authority. Okay. And for the final section there, he suggests that you look directly at the assembly and let your tone stress the divine relationship God is asserting. So this one you want to have in your mind, all memorized if you can, or at least nearly so. Okay, let me take a stab at this. A reading from the book of Exodus. Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro, the priest of Midian. Leading the flock across the desert, he came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There, an angel of the Lord appeared to Moses in fire flaming out of a bush. As he looked on, he was surprised to see that the bush, though on fire, was not consumed. So Moses decided, I must go over to look at this remarkable sight and see why the bush is not burned. When the Lord saw him coming over to look at it more closely, God called out to him from the bush, "Moses, Moses!" He answered, "Here I am." God said, "Come no nearer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place where you stand is holy ground. I am the God of your fathers," he continued, "the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob." Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. But the Lord said, "I have witnessed the affliction of my people in Egypt, and have heard the cry of complaint against their slave drivers. So I know well what they are suffering. Therefore I have come down to rescue them from the hands of the Egyptians, and lead them out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey." Moses said to God, "But when I go to the Israelites and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you,' if they ask me, 'What is his name?' what am I to tell them?" God replied, "I am who am." Then he added, "This is what you shall tell the Israelites: 'I am sent me to you.'" God spoke further to Moses, "Thus shall you say to the Israelites: 'The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever. Thus am I to be remembered through all generations." The word of the Lord. Before I go on to the next reading, I want to make a comment. I was telling you that I want your speech to sound more natural. Now, one thing I've noticed is that if a person is just reading, they usually have about 4 notes. Of course, I'm a musician, so I look at it that way. But there's the low point is where the period usually is, the end of a thought, end of a sentence. There's one above that, which would be more like a comma, which would be a kind of a half stop. And then the one above that would be the one where you normally speak in. And if you have a word that you want to accent, it goes up another. So that's about 4 notes. For those who are really just reading, that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing 4 notes, and there's not really a lot of expression. Sometimes we think we're expressing, but we might need to have someone listen to us. So we will attain that natural sound when we have many more than 4 notes, and a lot more nuances, more like our normal speech. As I'm speaking to you now, it's not just 4 notes, but there's even more of a musicality to it, and that's not because I'm a musician. That's just the way we are as people. We have a musicality to our speech. All right, so the first letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians, looking on page 75 of the commentary below. In the spiritual life, pride is likely as and even more deadly than in other areas. Therefore, Paul cautions his readers to look at their ancestors. They were favored by their God during their desert journey, yet they wound up in destruction. He warns them that their knowledge of Christ is no guarantee that they won't fall. Paul is teaching a lesson believers must learn and relearn in every generation. During the Exodus, Paul asserts their Jewish ancestors were guided through the desert by a cloud and escaped safely through the sea from Pharaoh's army. They dined on spiritual food, the manna, miraculously provided by God during their wanderings, and even their thirst was miraculously sated by water that flowed from a rock that Moses struck at God's command, and which Paul equates with Christ. Yet despite all this, very few survived the desert and entered the promised land. Paul intends this allusion to their history to serve as an object lesson for the Corinthians. They too are being led by the rock that is Christ. They have passed through their own sea in the waters of baptism, and God provides them with spiritual food and drink in the Eucharist. But the analogy does not end with parallel blessings. Ancient mistakes are manifested in the Corinthian community just as surely as ancient blessings, and Paul does not want to see the same consequences. The grumblings and the desire for evil things of their ancestors brought them destruction and death. To spare his converts and us from suffering this same fate, Paul firmly wants them to take care not to fail. Liner notes to the left on page 76. The opening call calls for eye contact. Try to do that. And when he reads this, he says, your tone is upbeat. Then in the middle there, he points out the word yet. This is a fulcrum. Everything shifts at this point, kind of like a seesaw. You know, it's one way, and then in the middle is the fulcrum. When it shifts, he's going to another thought here. And then Paul is very deliberate, so your tone needs to be deliberate. The last sentence is a blunt statement of warning. Don't pollute it. Don't dilute it. Sorry. A reading from the first letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians. I do not want you to be unaware, brothers and sisters, that our ancestors were all under the cloud and all passed through the sea, and all of them were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. All ate the same spiritual food and all drank the same spiritual drink, for they drank from a spiritual rock that followed them, and the rock was Christ. Yet God was not pleased with most of them, for they were struck down in the desert. These things happened as examples for us, so that we might not desire evil things as they did. Do not grumble, as some of them did, and suffer death by the destroyer. These things happened to them as an example, and they have been written down as a warning to us, upon whom the end of the ages has come. Therefore, whoever thinks he is standing secure should take care not to fall. The word of the Lord. The gospel reading commentary. Without a good familiarity with all the scripture, we can end up stereotyping even God. An incomplete reading of the Old Testament can yield a stern and angry God that many contrast with the God of the New Testament. And an incomplete reading of the New Testament can yield a saccharine Jesus who doesn't seem to have spine in his body. Of course, the reality in both testaments is quite different from the stereotype, and today's gospel text helps make the point. While it should be false to assume, as did those in Jesus' day, that all suffering results from sin, it would be just as false to assume that sin doesn't result in suffering. Even sin that's been forgiven leaves a mark on us. Here, Jesus is asserting two truths. Those who suffer have not necessarily sinned, but those who sin will eventually reap the fruit they've sown. In the first century, it was common to believe that misfortune was the sign of God's disfavor. Jesus disputes this false notion by alluding to the victims of two well-known contemporary disasters. When he talks about the tower of Siloam having fallen. Jesus' goal, like that of the season of Lent, is to awaken his listeners to an elusive truth. There's not as much time as we think. If we want to be right with God, today is the day, and now is the hour to take the first step. I'll let you read the rest of that. We'll look at this gospel now. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Some people told Jesus that the Galileans whose blood Pilate had mingled with the blood. Let me try that again, I'm sorry. Some people told Jesus about the Galileans whose blood Pilate had mingled with the blood of their sacrifices. Jesus said to them in reply, do you think that because these Galileans suffered in this way, that they were greater sinners than all other Galileans? By no means. But I tell you, if you do not repent, you will all perish as they did. Or those 18 people who were killed when the tower of Siloam fell on them, do you think they were more guilty than anyone else who lived in Jerusalem? By no means. But I tell you, if you do not repent, you will all perish as they did. And he told them this parable. There once was a person who had a fig tree planted in his orchard, and when he came in search of fruit on it, but found none, he said to the gardener, "For 3 years now I have come in search of fruit on this fig tree, but have found none. So cut it down. Why should it exhaust the soil?" He said to him in reply, "Sir, leave it for this year also, and I shall cultivate the ground around it and fertilize it, and it may bear fruit in the future. If not, you can cut it down." The Gospel of the Lord. I thank you for your attention to this ministry, and I'll look forward to hearing a little more expression. I'll tell you if you do too much. Thanks. God bless you all.